let's create the solution to your task, which is to create a loop that goes around every second for 5 seconds and writes a date time to a file. First, let's create the button that fires this off in our main storyboard. Button, and what should we call this? Let's call this log, not lof, log loop. Okay, and I'll just show you what happens when we double click this, but we don't give it a name. Xamarin will create its own name for you. So I'll just pop this in there, and it's called something very recognizable like UI button 25. And of course, that's bad news if you are a programmer and you come back to this much later on. You won't know what that means. Right, inside of here, we're going to create our little function. Now, in the project brief, I said this must be a non-blocking loop. That means we have to take it off of the UI thread. So let's have a var task is equal to task. In fact, we don't need to create a var task. We can just go ahead with a task dot. Let's right click it, resolve threading tasks. Dot factory dot start new. So asks for an action. Let's go ahead and give it one. Okay, so now we're off the main thread. Let's create our task. Let's grab the var file path is equal to path dot combine, and we want the environment dot get folder path, which is the environment dot special folder dot my documents. Then we need a file name to add to this inside of our path combine. Let's have log.txt and close off our bracket. Okay, we have our file path. What do we need to do next? Well, I'm going to show you a redundant check because, like I said previously in other lectures, the system I/O will create directories and files for you if they don't already exist. But just in case you want to know how, I'll show you how to check if it does exist. So if, and exclamation means doesn't, file dot exists, and pass it over the path, file path. So if it doesn't exist, then go ahead and file dot create the file path. So like I say, those two lines are redundant, but it just gives you an idea of how to do it. Now let's make our little 5-second loop for var I equals 0 until I is less than 5, I plus plus, so it'll go around 5 times. We need a var time that we're going to write to our file equals date time dot now, and this gives us the current date time, but it gives us it back in a date time which is not a text format, obviously. So there's a couple of nice helper methods inside this datetime class. We can have to, long, or short date string. Let's have a short date string, or even better, a short time string. Right, we have our time. Then we're going to add this into our text document. So we're going to have file.append all text. So you'll see when the summary here, it says it opens a file, appends the string, and then closes the file. If the file doesn't exist, it creates the file, writes the string, and then closes. So again, my file exists check is a bit redundant here. So appends all text, it wants the file path, and it wants the contents. So let's have time, and then we can add something like a separator of a comma or an asterisk, whatever you prefer. You can also put a new line separator in there. Now we want this to run every second, so let's make this thread go to sleep every 1000 or for 1000 milliseconds. And I think if I right click it, we need to resolve using system threading. Once that loop has run, let's see what that file looks like. Let's have console.writeLine and grab our file .read all. Let's see, read all text. There we go. Pass it over the file path, and we should have a complete function. So when I click the button, it's going to run through this loop, open the text file, append it and close it, sleep for a second, and finally, once it's run through that loop 5 times, it's going to output all of the text that we put in. Whoops, I've just got a horrible error somewhere. That looks like I've left a comma or a bracket out somewhere. I don't know if you can see this. You're probably looking at my screen, screaming out, saying, yeah, I can see it. Sort it out. In the task factory start new, I actually need to close off my curly brace, my bracket, and my semicolon. There we go. That works now. So click the log loop, come back to Xamarin, application output, and wait for it. After about 5 seconds, we have our little console.writeLine. So we have 423, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 short date strings that have been output. And all the time that's running, I still have the availability of, let me just remove this, of using the main thread of my app. So if I just show you what that looks like in real terms, if I click log loop, I can still create an item, read, and enumerate. Nothing is becoming blocked within my application. So I've read everything, but even so, that background thread is still running. Okay, that concludes the solution to your log file creation task.